Great to
Yeah.
finally meet you. I've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I'm super excited for this interview.
Yeah, no, no, thanks for inviting me.
There's a little bit of an echo. I can hear myself playing back.
Right, right. Yeah, no, I just went on YouTube to, yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, I've been watching so many of your lectures. I don't know if you've seen it. I sent you some of the content. I've been taking notes from your. I have 40 pages of notes. It feels like I'm
Wow,
back in school, and I dropped out
wow.
of college. So I really appreciate the work
Okay.
you do. First off, I'm not trying to
No,
overly glaze, but yeah, I really do love your lectures a lot.
well, thanks so much. Yeah.
Are you in Beijing right now?
No, I'm actually in Hainan, which is like Hawaii here in China. I'm here with my kids, so that's why there's a sea to my back.
Okay. So yeah,
Yeah.
how much time do you have today? Because I could take this conversation in many different directions.
Yeah, I mean, I have as much time as you need. I'm free all morning.
Okay, great. So obviously, the lectures that I sought to give you a little bit of context. I think sat through at least 10 or 11, and I've seen some of your interviews. I started off with your lecture on Pax Judaica and
Hmm.
eschatology, and then the most recent one I saw was about the Islamic Golden Age, which I loved that one, and
Oh,
it was
thank
super
you.
interesting to see your take as I'm a Muslim revert myself. I reverted 3 years ago, and so seeing your perspective, and also it's super funny to see like you wanted to go to Mecca, but they only allow Muslims in. You don't have a Muslim name.
Yeah, I found that out in Saudi Arabia. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been, I'm probably gonna go again. Ramadan's coming up, but
Right.
also, yeah, I love the lecture you did on the faith of evil, empire of evil. I think you really detailed Frankism well, because
Yeah.
Candace Owens brought up Frankism a couple months ago, and I don't think
Right.
that she explained it in the way that people wanted her to explain it. So there was a lot of back and forth about her, her interpretation. Not to yap forever. I'm just trying to give you a little bit of context about what I know.
Right.
But well, I just want to start off with your life. So what? Also, how do I pronounce your name? I've been calling you Professor Jiang on YouTube. I don't know how you prefer to go
Yeah,
by.
that's perfect. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
So Jiang is my last name and Xueqian is my first name. But here in China, people just refer to each other by their last name. So you just call me Professor Jiang. That's fine.
Okay, but we looked up the Google Translate. Your first name is Xie
Xueqian.
Shuiqin
Xueqian. Yes, that's
Shuiqin
perfect.
Jiang.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
Shuiqin Jiang.
Yeah.
Perfect. So yeah, very nice to meet you. My name's SNEAKO. Do you know anything about my content at all, or you don't really know much?
Yeah, you're an anti-Semitic, right? Yeah, I don't know.
No, no, no. I'm not a. Well, first we can even go into that. What you detailed well is how the real Semitic people, they actually go back to the Palestinians. Most of the Semitic people
That's right.
are Khazarian. People like Netanyahu and these people. They actually don't
That's
have
right.
traces to being Semitic at all. And that's probably why that word is being used so much, is to make people think that they deserve that homeland.
That's right. That's exactly right.
So yeah, I didn't know about the Khazarian people, and again, I'm 12% Ashkenazi, so I have that. So Ashkenazi is Khazarian, correct?
Yeah, basically, yes.
Okay, and yeah, I guess I do get called that. You probably get called anti-septic too.
No, I actually get called a Mossad agent a lot.
I saw
It's
that.
really weird. I've been called a CCP agent. I've been called a CIA agent. I've been called Mossad agent. Yeah, so I'm agent for everyone.
Yeah, I've heard every single, but I don't know why that why that allegation has any sort of basis, because based off of your lectures, you don't have any sort of bias besides your own interpretation of the world, right? You said things, you've been very critical of communism and how the isms, I love that lecture, about how all the isms are control mechanisms, right? Communism was subverted by Trotsky and by Karl Marx, and Karl Marx was actually backed by transnational capitalists. So it's like, why would
That's right.
capitalists associate with the communists? Because, okay, well, they both serve the transnational banks. So
That's right.
yeah, so I don't think I don't understand why. Well, you probably get these allegations because you detail things in a way that's convincing a lot of people. You've had a very big rise as of late.
Yeah. So I think there are certain factors at play. I mean, the first big factor is I came out of nowhere, right? So I sort of blew up last June when Trump launched Midnight Hammer, and there's this war in Iran, and I was really one of the few individuals to predict that there'd be a war between the United States and Iran. So that's one factor. So another factor is that I seem to know a lot about secret societies, about transnational capital, about intelligence organizations, about how evil and power works in this world. And so I think it's just human nature, human instinct to believe that I'm being fed this information by the elite or by powers that be, because they want this information out there in order to manipulate people in a certain way. So I think that's just a natural response. And then the third thing is that people don't really listen to all my lectures. They just focus on one lecture or one interview. And if you just do that, then I come across as favoring one side. So for example, people accuse me of being a Mossad agent because I believe that Israel will be the new superpower in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And what I argue is that this war against Iran that's coming up, we're building up towards this massive conflict between the United States and Iran. A lot of it is to create Pax Judaica, right? A lot of it is to make Israel the de facto power in the Middle East. And people hear that and they think I'm like advocating for this. They think that think that it's a great thing that we have Pax Judaica, and I'm not. I make predictions, I do analysis, and you listen to different lectures, then you will see that I make a lot of criticisms about Israel. That I think that Pax Judaica is a very evil thing. But again, people just focus in their own on one lecture or one interview, and that makes them think that I am biased.
Right. I think that was the first one I saw was Pax Judaica. And when you look back at your lectures, like, I have to give you credit. I was very critical of Trump's invasion of Venezuela and the kidnapping of Maduro. And now you can see that BRICS posted, and some people are speculating that Venezuela has now sent $2 to $3 billion worth of oil directly to Israel. And I got a lot of pushback from the right wing, and they said, okay, Monroe Doctrine, it's American empire. You predicted that America would invade Venezuela, I think in 2024.
I actually didn't do that. I didn't predict that America would invade Venezuela. Actually, Venezuela was a surprise to me. What I did predict in 2024 was that there'd be a civil war in America. And I think that actually this Venezuela, this Monroe Doctrine, this kidnapping of Maduro is actually part of a larger civil war. So the idea of the civil war is that there are two major factions that have emerged in America. The first major faction are the transnational capital, the global financial elite. And they've been in power since the Clinton years, mm-hmm. right? And they were responsible for the 2008 great financial crisis. And because they're in power in Washington, D.C., they're able to warp the political system in order to benefit the financial system. Mm-hmm. And that's why in 2008, after they collapsed the global economy, Obama still bailed them out. And you go back to the GameStop scandal during the Biden years, and that was just blatant insider trading, but they got away with it because they controlled the politicians in Washington, D.C. So that's the first major faction. But another faction that's emerging is Silicon Valley. So these are the tech oligarchs, people like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, and they're the ones backing Trump. And what they want to do is they want to take the resource of the American government and invest it in AI surveillance state, right? So that's why you see all this data centers being built, because the end goal is to create a nation in which everyone has digital ID, in which everything is digital currency, and then everything that you do online will be monitored and controlled by an AI system. Okay, so these are the two competing visions for America. But in order to build the surveillance state, in order to build the Pax Judaica, what they need to do is destroy the old system, right? And that's why you're seeing what's happening in Venezuela, the rise of the Monroe Doctrine, the Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. That's why you're seeing gold, silver, Bitcoin being artificially inflated than crashing, right? Because then you're destroying the economy that way. That's also why you're also seeing ICE in Minnesota, because they're trying to create a Palantir police state. They're trying to provoke as much violence as possible to justify the use of Palantir. And so this conflict right now in America between the old deep state and the new deep state, between the financial elite and the tech oligarchs, is I think what best explains what's happening in America and around the world today.
I'm seeing a theory that nuclear energy and the investment, I see that billionaires like Peter Thiel are investing into nuclear energy so that we don't have to rely upon oil as much anymore. Do you believe that theory?
Yeah, absolutely. So the problem with AI is that it consumes a lot of energy. So you need different energy sources. The problem with oil is that it's very expensive to transport around, and then it's also prone to geopolitical conflicts, right? So if there's a war in the Middle East, where are you going to get your oil from, right? So not only are they looking at nuclear energy, but they're also looking at geothermal energy. That's why Greenland is important, right? Because Greenland is a cold place. So you're going to have like data centers in Greenland. It won't be that expensive to cool because it's already a cold climate, and there's geothermal energy. So it'll be pretty cost effective to power, okay? So the thing about data centers, like where can we place the data centers and where would it be efficient and cheap to power these data centers?
Yeah, and you could see the arrogance from, which you often call hubris. I think that's a great definition, the arrogance of American empire. We've been the global empire, Americans, for so long that when we see Trump invade Venezuela and kidnap the president, or when they talks about taking over Greenland, Americans get super excited because they're like, yes, American empire. But that hubris distracts from the greater picture and what's really going on behind the scenes.
Right. Well, there's a big issue in that the people are the ones who are financing this empire, right? It's these poor people who have to go to war to defend this empire. It's the middle class that's paying the taxes for the military-industrial complex, which is one of the most corrupt organizations in the world. It's the people who have to deal with these illegal immigrants that are coming into America because of the empire, right? Look, the reality is that people don't want to leave their homes. If their homes are being destroyed by climate change or by the war on terror, then they have no choice but to go to a new place. So you look at Europe, which is being overrun by refugees, right? Well, why? Because where are these refugees from? They're from Afghanistan, they're from Iraq, they're from Syria, they're from Libya, which is all nations that America went in to destroy for no particular reason. So that's the cost of empire. So you think it's a great thing to have an empire, but the vast majority of people, 99% of people within the empire, are the ones who are enslaved by it, the ones exploited by it, the ones who are financing it in order to benefit a certain elite.
Yeah, I want to ask
how they had it all ready, and then when after 9/11 happened, you had the rise of basically the American security state, you have the rise of the American empire. So if you go to Washington D.C. back in 1999, if you go to the suburbs, it was pretty empty. You go to the suburbs today, right? Virginia, Fairfax County, they're all mansions. Okay, so this is the benefit of the war on terror. It basically funded the American security state, and it made a lot of people very wealthy. I was in Afghanistan in 2006, so I was part of the war on terror. I was working for the United Nations, and like, my God, like everyone was getting filthy rich. I was a low-level UN official, but look, I saw people walking home with millions of dollars in cash. Like they would literally go to the UN pay office, okay, and then they begin these bundles of hundreds of dollars of bills in American cash. They were like billions of dollars, like plain loads of billions of dollars, which just went missing. We now know that the American soldiers were there partly to protect the poppy trade, in order to make sure that opium went to the Sackler family, which of course caused the opioid epidemic that killed thousands of Americans, right? So the war on terror, yeah, I mean, so you just look at the evidence, and you just look at what's suspicious about 9/11, and then you looked at who benefits from 9/11, and you looked at how things have transpired after 9/11, then you are forced to conclude that it was probably an inside job by the security state. And the argument is that after the fall of the Soviet Union, Americans no longer wanted to be involved overseas. They didn't care about what happened outside the world because this great threat, this communist menace, it was erased. Now we just be friends around the world, cut back the security state, limit the Pentagon budget. And so they engineered 9/11 in order to justify the military-industrial complex,
Right.
which is what really controls America. Yeah.
Right, and so you are predicting that Trump was going to go to war with Iran, even though he campaigned on no new wars. And you could see the Trump MAGA base, they've switched their opinions on so much, right? Trump said on the Truth Social that he does not support anybody who wants the release of the Epstein files. Ben Shapiro, one of the biggest supporters, said that the Epstein files don't exist. Now he's blaming Steve Bannon. And so you can see a lot of his supporters, although they were promised these things during the campaign, they now have accepted his change in rhetoric, right? Especially the war in Iran, which is the biggest one. And it is probably, do you believe that the war in Iran is the catalyst to start World War III or the end times?
I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I think that that's why they do it. I think that the people in the Pentagon know that this war in Iran, it'll be a disaster because America is not ready for a war.
Mm-hmm.
To fight a war, you need, first of all, you need manufacturing capacity, right? You need to be able to produce bullets and tanks and planes. And America offshored its manufacturing capacity to China. There's no way that China is going to produce tanks and bullets for the American military, right? Okay, so that's issue number one, manufacturing capacity. Number two is political will. And the reality is that American people don't understand why America would start a war in Iran. And Americans have no ill feelings towards Iranians, okay? It's not like Afghanistan and Iraq where Americans were gaslighted into believing that Saddam Hussein was responsible for 9/11, where Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. You could make a case against Iraq and Saddam Hussein. It's impossible for you to make a case against Iran because Iranians have been extremely cooperative. In fact, you would argue that they got out of their way to be as peaceful as possible with America because America assassinated their top general in the Middle East, General Soleimani, which is a declaration of war. Basically, it's an act of war when you kill an ambassador or an envoy of a nation, right? But the Iranians never retaliated, they never responded really. And then you have Operation Midnight Hammer. You have all these acts of provocation, right? And the Iranians have shown tremendous restraint, and the Iranians have tried every way in order to negotiate a peace treaty, a new nuclear deal with Trump, and Trump has always rebuffed them, and Trump has always tried to provoke them. So Americans don't really understand what the problem here is, right? So the rally of the nation for a war against Iran will be really hard. I think they'll have problems with a draft, right? Because you'll need a draft in order to send troops to Iran, and which Americans are gonna go fight this war, right? And then remember, the biggest problem in Vietnam was fragging. I'm not sure if you heard the term fragging, but fragging is where soldiers kill their own officers because their officers were idiotic, were incompetent, were sent to their deaths because the officers wanted to rise up in the ranks. So fragging was a huge problem in Vietnam. So basically, troop morale, okay? You're going to have a problem with troop morale if you fight this war in Iran. The third problem is just logistics, which is to say that Iran is 3 times the size of Iraq, and Iran is mountainous, right? Yeah. So Iraq was a desert, which makes it ideal for an air campaign. And this war was wrapped up in 2 weeks' time. There's nothing the Iraqis could do about it, and also because of sanctions.
You said 3 weeks in your lecture that they bragged that it was 3 weeks.
Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. Right. So 2 or 3 weeks. Right. Yeah, but I mean, from Pentagon perspective, if we did that in Iraq, we can do the same thing in Iran, and so if you just look at the reporting, they're looking at about a weeks-long campaign in order to decapitate the regime, and I'm like, that's gonna take years, man, to decapitate the regime, but they don't really understand that. So logistics will be a huge problem. And if you just look at the American military doctrine, it's shock and awe, right? It's we go in, we blow things up, and then we leave. But to fight a war in Iran, you need to go in, establish 4 operating bases, control logistics, win over the population, and then slowly advance against Tehran. And that's what the Russians do, and that's what the Russians are doing very well in Ukraine. Americans don't do that. Americans are like, go in, do it on the cheap, and get out, and let the Israelis or whoever
Yeah.
take care of the rest. So logistics is not going to work out for the Americans. And number four is Russia is gonna get involved, right? Because like let's just assume that Americans go in and take over Iran. Well, now the southern underbelly of Russia is exposed. They're fighting this war in Ukraine, so their eastern flank is occupied. Now the southern flank opens up, and the southern flank is, as you know, mostly Muslim, right? And it's very easy for the Americans to embed insurgents, ISIS insurgents, which is basically CIA, to disrupt the southern flank of Russia. So Iran is an existential crisis for Russia. They have to protect Iran, otherwise they're exposed in the south. China gets a lot of its oil from Iran. Iran exports about 80% of its oil really cheaply to China. And if Iran were to close off the Strait of Hormuz, then China would lose its oil supply. So China we need to get involved as well. So so there are these geopolitical dimensions that really didn't exist during the 2003 Iraq War. Remember, because after the war, because after 9/11, the world was sympathetic towards America, and so when Bush declared war against Iraq, he was able to build a coalition of the willing. Right? You had Britain, Tony Blair, heavily involved in the war, and the United Nations was also involved as well in rebuilding Iraq after the war. But with this war in Iran, the United States is basically alone, and it's going to be up against major geopolitical adversaries, including China and Russia. And then problem number 5 is that America is now politically polarized. It's a very divided country. So you can imagine that this war in Iran, then you're going to see massive protests. The entire left is going to be galvanized. And you'll see this massive protest. ICE and Homeland Security will go in, and you're going to have a Vietnam situation where the war can't be won overseas, and then the war is probably going to be lost at home. So I mean, I can go on, but I mean, like it's a hopeless situation
Right.
for the American.
I loved your lecture, your comprehensive analysis on war in Iran, because I think most people are predicting that America defeats Iran in a war. But you explained, and again, you reiterated it here, how Iran is a mountainous region, so they're going to have to deploy troops. You speculated around 100,000, and that it would end up being a hostage situation because Iran would not let the troops leave, right? So they have to deploy them by plane, but Iran has good technology in order to shoot down planes.
Drones. All you need is drones, and Iran has prepared for this war. And we know because of the weaponry, right? Where have they focused all their resources? On drones, right, and on ballistic missiles, which is the ideal situation if you're anticipating an American invasion. So something else that I forgot to mention, which is very important, is the religious nature, the religious framework of the Iranians. They're different from other Muslims in that they're Shia Muslims, right? And Shia Muslims, as you know, they believe in eschatology, the 12 Imam. They believe in martyrdom. If you go back to the 1980s and you look at the Iraq-Iranian war, I mean, like if you just look at the like the framework or in the beginning, right? You had the Iraqis who were backed up by both the Soviet Union and Americans. They had advanced helicopters, tanks, and then the Iranians had to destroy their own military. They didn't really have an air force. They had planes. They couldn't actually fix their planes because they got all the materials from the Americans. And so what they did was they just went out in the front lines with the rifles, and they just scared the living shit out of the Iraqis, right? Because these people, the Iranians, they're not afraid to die for their homeland. They're not afraid to die for the religion. They're not equipped to deal with people who have actual religious faith and zealotry in the war.
So you cut out for a second, but you mentioned the difference. Sunnis in Islam, we still do believe in martyrdom, or you could see the resistance fighters in Palestine right now that they do. So could you explain the difference in martyrdom? What was your main difference between Shia and Sunni, if you could explain that?
Yeah, so again, I don't know as much about the Islamic faith as you do, okay? But the Shia has always been a minority, a persecuted minority within the larger
Around
Islamic
10%.
faith.
Yeah.
And yeah, about 10%. They've always been persecuted because they're considered like heretics, right? Because they follow Ali.
Yeah.
And the way they've been able to survive as a group is cohesion, right? They and but also martyrdom, where it's the greatest honor to sacrifice yourself for the cause. And so this is one factor. The other thing about the Iranians is that they're Zoroastrian as well. So
Mhm.
even though they are on the surface Islamic, in their hearts, their soul, it's Zoroastrian. And Zoroastrian has always been an eschatological tradition. And this is the Persian Empire. So they have this, belief in eschatology. They have this deep national pride. They have this. These are extremely brave people.
Mhm.
The Shia are sort of notorious for their fanatics, for being fanatics and for being
Yeah.
zealots, right?
And they deserve credit for
So
that. Did you see them burn the ball statue 2 or 3 days
yeah,
ago?
yeah. And like, look. I think when they did that, that's to say that we're all in now, okay? If you hit us this time, we're gonna go on. It's not gonna be like last year when you hit us, we'll be like, okay, like, we don't really fight. It's like now if you hit us, we've made the commitment to go all in. We will fight you to the death.
Right. Yeah, and you definitely. I want to get into faith on later, but there's so much more to talk about geopolitically and your predictions. But you definitely know a lot about Islamic Empire and the differences. And what I really liked about your analysis was the comparison to Zelensky in Ukraine. Right. Zelensky was a former television actor, just as Trump. Trump was a reality TV star. So their focus is going to be on optics and appearances. Right. And so that's
Yeah,
why Trump is probably going to have an invasion in Iran because it's going to look good on TV. Zelensky,
yep,
his grave mistake, and you were completely right about this, was the fact that he was fighting a losing battle. He should have retreated, but he wanted to be on the front lines, and he was wearing the turtleneck and always trying to appear as a good leader. He had hubris, and that was his downfall, was prioritizing his ego rather than the goodness of his country.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, that's the issue with American military doctrine. It's all for the audience back at home, right? So you look at Desert Storm. It was the first TV war, the Persian Gulf War back in 1991. And it's actually what made CNN so powerful, so famous, right? American military, it's for them, it's like, it's about winning the optics war. And it's a disaster against Iran because remember, for the past 20 years, America has never really fought an enemy that is willing to fight to the death, right? So when they went into 2003, when they went to Iraq, most of the population had turned against Saddam Hussein anyway. He was very unpopular because of the economic sanctions, because it was a dictatorship. And people really believed that this war was a war of liberation and that it would bring democracy and economic prosperity to Iraq. But then, of course, we saw what happened. And the people who saw it happen really close up, of course, is the Iranians because they live next door. And so they know exactly, like, when the Americans come in, it's not to bring democracy. It's not to reinstall the Shah. It's not to get rid of the Islamic theocracy. It's to break up the nation into ethnic enclaves so that it could be divided and ruled. It's to destroy the nation of Iran, which is what they did in Syria and Libya. You go to remember, people forget this, but in the 70s and 80s, Libya, Syria, and Iraq, all three of these nations were vibrant middle-class countries. And then because of economic sanctions, because of the Americans, all these nations were destroyed. You go to Libya today, it's no longer a functioning state. You have slave markets in Libya. So the Iranians know this is a war to the death, and
Right.
they will fight to the death.
Yeah, I want to ask you. So there's two conflicting things going on, right? When it comes to eschatology, what it's stated to create greater Israel, to expand from the Nile to the Euphrates, is that they need to intentionally spread anti-Semitism so that
Yeah.
Jews can operate as a monolithic group. But how does that coincide with the fact that they also need support? They need to have people hating Iran and also thinking that the U.S. and Israel are the same country and should work together. How do you spread anti-Semitism while also Netanyahu's paying people $7,000 per post? He's going on the Nelk Boys podcast. How do you spread anti-Semitism but also get support? Because if you don't have that faith that this war is something good, that's probably why the Vietnam War was such a disaster, is that they knew from the jump, which you said in your lecture, that this was a losing battle, but they kept on fighting because the casino effect, right? Once you go into the casino, you can't leave because once you lose, you want to make back your losses. So how are they intentionally spreading anti-Semitism while also gaining support for this war?
Right. Okay. So this goes back to the founding of Zionism. Okay. So this is Theodor Herzl, and this is the end of the 19th century, and he was trying to create a homeland for the Jews, right? And they're looking at different possibilities, including like Uganda and in Israel, Palestine. But the problem with Palestine, of course, was that you had Arabs living there already, and so Theodor Herzl was going around promoting this plan, and he was backed by secret societies and by transnational capital. And the problem, of course, is that Jews were like, this is retarded. We're happy in Britain. We're happy in Germany. We're happy in America. Why the hell would we want to go to a desert where everyone's poor and it's just backward? So only about 3% of the entire population of Jews around the world at that time supported the idea of a homeland for Jews, right? Also, there were these religious considerations in that if you do this, if you set up a homeland for the Jews, you're going against the will of God, because Jews believe that they will return to Jerusalem when the Messiah appears, and God will appoint the Messiah to appear. So let's just wait for the Messiah to appear, and then we'll go home. Okay? So that was the faith of Jews at that time. But then, of course, you had certain events that happened in the 20th century, which compelled the Jews to return to Israel and to found the state of Israel, and that, of course, is the Holocaust and World War II. If you look at the history of World War II and the rise of Hitler, well, there's a lot of suspicious activity. Okay, I mean, like I don't want to get into it because I don't want you bad everywhere. Okay,
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, but if you look at some of the evidence, the evidence will tell you is that Hitler had every reason to work with the Zionists, right? Because Hitler's ambition was to get rid of the Jews. Mm-hmm. He didn't want to kill the Jews because that would look bad. What he wanted to do was get the Jews and make them leave, right? And then you have the Zionists in Palestine who want the Jews to come to Palestine. So of course they work together. In fact, they had these memos of cooperation where Hitler would send Jews to Palestine.
The Havar Agreement.
Exactly. So and these are documents, okay? So the idea of anti-Semitism is not, let's hate Jews. The entire point of anti-Semitism is let's get the Jews to go back to Israel and leave us alone, mm-hmm. right? I mean, the entire message of anti-Semitism is like Jews are only loyal to Israel, and therefore they should go to Israel and leave us alone, mm-hmm. right?
Right. And Germany had such a great economic recovery. I don't know if you're allowed to say this, but it's just factually true that Germany was in an economic disaster after World War I, but after they changed the banks, and they kept them private, if I'm not mistaken, and they refused to interact with transnational capital the way that they were before, Germany recovered in a way that Europe had never seen.
Yeah, no, I mean, back in the 1930s, Hitler was Times Man of the Year. I mean, he was celebrated throughout the world for restoring the German economy, mainly by nationalizing the German economy, by restoring sovereignty, monetary sovereignty, right? Because before Hitler, most of the German economy was geared towards repaying war debts, reparations. And Germany was being controlled by something called the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Germany, which is like the central bank of central banks. And in existence, the entire point of the Bank of International Settlements is to force Germany to pay all its resources to other nations. Okay, so Germany was being bled out, and then Hitler promised national rejuvenation. He promised national sovereignty. He didn't want to conquer the world. He just wanted to be left alone, right? I mean, like that was his message. We, the German people, ought to have our own nation, and we ought to rule this nation by ourselves. But because Hitler was destroying transnational capital, because he was kicking out the central banks, right, the Bank of International Settlements, then the response is to declare war, right? So you make the argument that all Hitler wanted was national sovereignty, but that national sovereignty would disrupt transnational capital, and therefore transnational capital had to conspire to create a war to get rid of him. And look, this is a pattern throughout the 20th century. Like whenever you try to defy transnational capital, then they go after you. Okay, this is true for every nation, with everyone, right? You look at these nations that have been destroyed by the American military, or the nations that are being targeted by the American military, right? These nations that are destroyed, or Libya, Syria, Iraq, they don't have central banks. Countries that are being targeted right now, Venezuela, Iran, North Korea, they don't have central banks either, right? So you can make the argument the entire point of the military-industrial complex is to make the world safe for transnational capital. That's it.
Right. You could hear that rhetoric from Pam Bondi when she's being pressured about Epstein. I'm sure you've seen this. She starts saying, but the Dow is up. The stock market is thriving. So why don't look into Epstein? Let's just go and look at the Dow.
That's who her boss is. That's who pays her, right?
Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you looked at Epstein extensively. I haven't seen your lectures on Germany in the 30s and the National Socialist movement, but so Epstein right now, that is, first off, I expected a lot more of an awakening from that. The 3 million files released. There's ironically 6 million files that are supposed to be released, which is a funny number. But what should we expect? What are your predictions now with the Epstein files? Is this being released intentionally to get people to start hating? Is this another move for the Pax Judaica expansion?
Yeah, right. So the entire point of Pax Judaica is to create an AI surveillance state, right? And I talk about this, where you have data centers controlling everyone's information. You have digital ID, digital currency. The problem is, how do you convince people to go into this world of AI surveillance? Well, the best way is with children, right? So let's just say that you're just a normie, you're a suburban wine mom, and you look at these Epstein files, and how do you feel? You feel fear for your children, right? So at some point, as more of these allegations emerge, as the Epstein files reveal the depravity of the global elite, right? So things that we haven't seen so far, but which should be in the Epstein files, are snuff films, right? I mean, like if you just look at where the Epstein files are going, what's been revealed so far, you can imagine that what they're not releasing are snuff films, and there are other levels of depravity as well. And then you have also like the hunting of children, where you let children into the forest and you hunt them like you would like rabbits or something. So it's all in there, and they'll release it sooner or later, okay? But the entire point is to traumatize the population so that they'll be much more amenable to state authority, right? So how can we prevent Epstein from emerging again? Well, let's microchip our children, right? If you put a microchip in your kid, in his bloodstream, you'll never be afraid of your child going missing, because there are hundreds of thousands of children who go missing every year in the United States alone. You think about these 20 million migrants who came in through the Biden administration, right? These legal immigrants. A lot of the children went missing as well, right? So there's this huge industry for the kidnapping of children, and so if you make that the omnipresent issue, if this is all that people think about, then you make it much more easier for people to accept the idea of microchipping their children.
Okay,
right?
Just like 9/11 was used for the Patriot Act and mass surveillance. So you think that the Epstein files released now is to traumatize people to spread what Palantir wants, what Peter Thiel wants with mass surveillance, that this is another, and there is conflicting ideas. I'm not sure how this correlates, but I saw that now a lot of American parents don't want their kids to be going to Picture Day anymore, because they found that the biggest Picture Day organization, which you have to put your fingerprint, you have to take a picture of yourself, you have to put your age.
Exactly.
Even if you don't pay for the photos, you still have to, you're basically sending it into a database. And if I'm not mistaken, these people are implicated with Epstein. So if we also realize that mass surveillance is the reason that they could target our children, is it going to be that easy to convince them? There was a Super Bowl ad with the Ring camera. That's the company that you could put a camera on your door and you could see your street. they said that there's AI technology. So if your dog runs away in the neighborhood, it can scan all the Ring cameras and AI will figure out where the dog went. Do you think that Americans are going to be that easily convinced of mass surveillance?
Okay, right. So mass surveillance is just part of the picture. Okay, so let's go over the reasons why they would want the Epstein files released, right? Because it's ultimately their choice whether or not to release Epstein files. Okay, so the first is to make people much more amenable to the idea of a surveillance state. Okay, the second issue is to destroy the old elite, right? Because who's in the Epstein files? It's the old elite, the financial elite, people like Larry Summers, people like Bill Clinton, people like Bill Gates. Okay, this is the old financial elite I was talking about, which control the world for the longest time. So what you do is you create this rage against Wall Street, those rage against the old financial elite that Epstein was part of. Remember, Epstein hated Trump because Trump was a threat to the old world order that he ran. So that's reason number two. Reason number three is you create the conditions for a civil war. You create conflict in the streets, right? Because the more conflict there is between left and right, the more you can justify the use of a police state. And then number four is a targeting of certain individuals. Okay, so certain individuals that should be in the Epstein files are Bill Clinton. Okay, he's definitely in there, but I think that they're holding back the most inflammatory information for a particular reason, right? Because eventually they want to go after the Clintons, Bill and Hillary Clinton. They want to go after John Podesta, who really is the power broker behind the Democratic Party, and he is. I mean, like, you go back to Pizzagate, okay, right? The Podesta emails that was released by WikiLeaks. I mean, like, he's heavily implicated. But then, basically everyone in the Democratic Party, including Barack Obama, is also implicated in Pizzagate as well. You have Hollywood that's heavily implicated in Pizzagate, in pedophilia. So you want to create as much violence as possible by targeting certain individuals that become like lightning rods for violence. You'll probably have targeted political assassinations that's coming. But basically, the entire intention is to burn America down so that you can rebuild it with an AI surveillance state. Okay, so you need violence on the streets for this AI surveillance state to happen.
So things like ICE, where you see the left and the right are all up in arms about ICE, conveniently around the release of the Epstein files, is this another product of, for lack of a better term, goy slop information like George Floyd to keep us fighting each other and picking sides?
Right. So you go to Rennie Good, okay? So the thing about Rennie Good was, in the back, first of all ICE agents were asked to produce as much social media content as possible, okay? They wanted to showcase as much violence as possible in order to increase recruitment, in order to create as much outrage among the left as possible. You go to Rennie Good and you look at the evidence, and it seemed as though the intention was to kill her. It seemed as though the man was provoked. He had certain rage for the arrogance, for the hubris of someone like Rennie Good, right? Because remember, during the Obama years, it was these suburban, left white women that was really in control, right? They're the ones responsible for DEI. They're responsible for woke politics, which suppress these rural conservative men that's now, working for ICE. So there's just already this civil war going on between, liberal suburban women who are educated and these rural conservative men who are just high school graduates. And so, and then remember, JD Vance, after the video came out, he actually promoted this video on the internet, and everyone's like, wait a minute, this isn't it doesn't escapade. It doesn't prove that this man was innocent. In fact, it does the opposite. And what they don't understand is that JD Vance is promoting this video because it's a recruitment video. It's to show that if you join ICE, you can now seek vengeance against all these white liberal women who've been oppressing you ever since the Obama years. Okay, so a civil war is being instigated, it's being provoked, it's being planned.
Mm-hmm. And overall, so the bigger picture is that it's the transfer. So now the new world order is the tech, Palantir, mass surveillance age, where it used to be Wall Street and global transnational banking. But then how does the family like the Rothschilds, who Epstein in the emails, he said that he represents the Rothschilds. This is a family who has manipulated what you mentioned in your lecture, that the Rothschild family knew that the Battle of Waterloo was actually won by the British against the French, but they manipulated the media because they were in control of the media at the time in order to instill panic within England, and then they bought up all the low stock. Does a family like the Rothschild family suffer, or do they continue their reign under the tech age?
Yeah, so if you're the Rothschilds, you're betting on both sides, right? Remember that's what transnational capital does. It bets on both sides. So you go back to the Bolshevik Revolution. It funded both the Bolsheviks and the whites, right? And you go back to World War II, it was funding every side, right? So your transnational capital, that's how you play the game. So the Rothschilds have investments in both, right? And look, if you're the Rothschild and before you put your money into stocks, now you put your money into data centers, right? Now you put your money into Israel.
Okay, so they play both. I think that's one of the hardest red pills for people to swallow, is that both sides are serving the same people, right? People have so much allegiance, and I've been reiterating this the whole year, that I don't know how you feel, but I don't align with any political ideology, right? I'm getting called a communism by people like Matt Walsh, and then people on the far left will call me a Nazi. I get called a radical Islamist. They say you're alt-right and all this stuff. I'm sure you get accusations for the same thing as well. But detailed through your lectures, it just becomes completely evident that all these isms, and even in the words of Dennis Prager, he said every single ism, except for Nazism, has been predominantly run by Jews. And this is a Jewish man who runs one of the biggest conservative media platforms in America. This is him saying this, right? All these isms serve the same goal. Is that true? And do you have a political affiliation at all?
Yeah, so I think the point of these isms, right, is to create a dialectic, which then creates change, okay? So let's go back to communism. And I talked about this, right, where capitalism, transnational capital, was creating a lot of problems. And at this time in history, there were two separate solutions to the problem of capitalism. The first solution was socialism, which is the redistribution of wealth. The second solution is anarchism, which is say like let's get rid of government, because what's the point of government anyway? All they do is serve bankers, right? So these were two extremely popular isms during the 19th century. And the solution is to create communism, because when you create communism, what you do is you discredit both anarchism and socialism, right? Because the point of communism is you need a revolutionary vanguard in order to create as much violence as possible, overthrow the bourgeoisie, and then instill a communist dictatorship, a workers' paradise. And now if you're a liberal, and before if you're a liberal middle class individual, you don't have problems with socialism, because socialism, redistribution of wealth, in theory, you should have more status and power, right, if you're middle class. But now with communism, this is a huge issue. And communism was used in order to eradicate other oppositions towards capitalism, transnational capital, including religion, right, including monarchies. And so the classic example, of course, is Russia. Russia was resilient against transnational capital because they were an Orthodox faith and they had a czar. And so if you wanted to spread capitalism around the world, and Russia was, this virgin territory, it was very wealthy, then you need communism in order to overthrow the regime. And that's exactly what happened, okay? And the same thing happened in China as well, where because of these cultural prejudices, it was hard for transnational capital to come in and co-opt and enslave the people. With communism in place, then people's minds are cleared, right? That's what the Cultural Revolution was about. It was to destroy all tradition, all ethnic identity, all sort of national pride, and then you make yourself then open and for enslavement to transnational capital. And that's exactly what's happening in China. Okay, I mean, like I live in China. I'm feeling like this is a zombie civilization. They destroyed the civilization a long time ago. Everyone is utilitarian, like everyone's just money obsessed in this country.
Right. Well, I like your explanation about communism. One, that it's an inevitable trajectory. It goes from capitalism to socialism to communism. You can see that right now in New York City. Just elected a Democratic Socialist mayor. because everybody has, the average debt in Gen Z is $94,000. People can't afford rent the same way. So naturally, you're going to elect somebody that promises things that are going to be cheaper. But also, your explanation of communism makes perfect sense when you realize that it was in order to direct the conversation away from faith and towards class. And so there's leftist streamers. I don't know if you know Hassan Piker. Someone like this, he hasn't really connected Epstein to Israel, even though it's blatantly obvious all over the files. And it's because people who focus and fixate on communism and socialism, they are meant, and the whole goal of communism is to get people speaking about the class issue. So now Israel is not a part of Pax Judaica. Israel is not part of a bigger faith movement. It's really about class. It's a fascist state. It's class warfare, which distracts from what's really going on and what was always supposed to happen in eschatology.
Okay, so I'll tell something really funny.
Okay.
So Pax Judaica, this tech oligarchy that this surveillance state that you're trying to create. The blueprint is a book, 1970 book called Between Two Ages, by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was the national security advisor to Jimmy Carter, and he's one of the two big foreign policy giants in America. So the other one, of course, was Henry Kissinger. Okay, so these two are responsible for the grand strategy of America. And he writes this book, Between Two Ages. And he outlines a plan for creating a surveillance state, a nation ruled by experts, okay? And if you read the book, what's really interesting is he has nothing but praise for Marx, right? And his argument is this: Marx embodies Enlightenment thinking, because what Marxism does is it rises above religion and race. It's universal. It's Enlightenment principles. It's reason, okay? So in other words, what these people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk are trying to create is techno-Marxism, right? Because what's Marxism? Marxism is a nation ruled by an bureaucratic elite that knows more than you do, right? And it's a command economy. Well, that's what the AI surveillance state is. So another word for AI surveillance state is techno-Marxism.
Techno-Marxism. Usually I take notes in your lecture. I'm like, but I'll go back and watch this. So I think a bigger question here, and what I think was explained well, I keep saying that, but I really do appreciate your lectures, is how Judaism started. So I haven't went completely into the Torah, but is it true, was in original Judaism, was Jesus supposed to be the true Messiah and he was rejected because he was wearing plain clothes and they expected him to be presenting as a man dressed in gold? And is that the true Messiah, or is it always predestined? Was it always written that they had a different Messiah than Jesus?
Yeah, so the Messiah is supposed to be from the house of David, and he was supposed to be a prince, and he was supposed to be a war Messiah, a Messiah of war, right? So the Messiah was supposed to come, unite the Jewish people, and overthrow whatever oppressor existed at that time. So at that time in history, it was the Roman Empire. So they really believed that the Messiah would come, unify the Jewish people, and destroy the Roman Empire and create the Messianic age. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's what the Jewish faith taught back then. It's still what the Jews believe today. They believe that what they're doing in Israel is to force the return of the Messiah, or the coming of the Messiah, to lead them to victory, right?
The Antichrist, or in Islam we say the Dajjal, which is the same.
Well, yeah, so for the Jews it's the Messiah. For the Christians it's the Antichrist.
And yes. the Muslims too. The idea of the Antichrist is identical in Islam. That we also accept Jesus not just as a prophet, but as the Messiah who will return. And what was detailed well was how Judaism has been subverted for empire gain and for political motives, right? Like the Khazarians, who now dominate 80% of the Jewish faith, they had to decide, so the Khazarians, their empire fell, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes, okay. The Mongols destroyed the empire, yes.
The Mongols destroyed the Khazarians, and so they had to pick a religion in order to get more power, and they picked Judaism because it was seen as as supreme, because it came before Islam and Christianity. And also, you mentioned, detailed a lot, the idea of the Frankists and Jacob Frank and what they were doing with incest and putting their own will first and thinking that sinning separated them from God so that they should sin because they would know more about themselves, because God doesn't sin, because God is the almighty, perfect, greatest creator. And so sinning is what made us divine in a way, like this Frankist ideology. but it's united. Why do you think that these ideologies have united? Because the Rothschilds, they are seen and pictured with Marina Abramovich, and there's other Rothschild members wearing ball or Malak necklaces in this. Are all these subversions, and are all these? Why do you see the overlap? Why does it seem like they also support Israel? Is that a unification with Judaism? Or the people that are trying to establish Greater Israel, do they allow for this to happen because it also supports their eschatology that they need the end of the world? Are they okay with Malak and Baal because it does serve the greater picture, or is this a part of Judaism?
Right. So everyone supports Israel because Israel is key to the different eschatologies. Okay. So Pax Judaica is an important element in the divine plan. The Jews basically need to create the Pax Judaica, and then once the Pax Judaica is created, this will start a war, the war of Gog and Magog. And when the war of Gog and Magog happens, and when Israel is most threatened, then the Messiah will return to save Israel. And at this point, depending on your faith, two things will happen, okay? If you're a Christian, you believe that the rapture will happen. When Jesus returns, all Christians of true faith will be elevated to heaven. And then Jesus will defeat the enemies of Israel and force the Jews to convert, okay? So if you're a Jew at this time, you can actually choose to convert or you will burn in hell. Okay, so that's a Christian interpretation of the end times. The Jewish interpretation of the end times is the Messiah will come and all Christians will be enslaved and Israel will become the light of nations, meaning it will become the empire. Okay, the Pax Judaica, and everyone will serve the Jews. Okay, so these are two diverging eschatologies, but where they converge is the triumph of Israel in the Middle East, and that's why we're seeing all these issues in the Middle East. Iran is key because once you destroy Iran, then Israel becomes a de facto power in the Middle East. So,
Right.
so Iran is the last stumbling block, right?
Right. And you mentioned again, which I never made this connection, I was annoyed at myself, that Israel actually wants America to lose the war against Iran because it destabilizes
Yeah.
Iran, not the same way, but also, like, so many Americans have this idea that America and Israel, we're allies, they're our greatest ally, but if America loses and we lose our spot as the global empire, then it just gives Israel the opportunity to now dominate the Middle East without our hands meddling in it. But
Right.
they don't actually, one, they don't give us anything, but two, they don't, what do they stand to gain from having us or America as the global empire?
Right. So these eschatologies, they agree on certain things, okay? So they agree that you need to create Pax Judaica for the end times to happen. They also agree that America will not be involved in the end times. So what you need to do is you need to remove America from the equation. And the way you do that is you start this war in Iran, you make this war unwinnable, and it destroys American military capacity in the Middle East, and then it triggers a civil war in America, and so America is distracted from the Middle East. Okay, that's a plan.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And so what are your predictions now, your short-term predictions? There's been major developments. You've been speaking about this for several years, and your lectures got a lot of this correct. What do you see coming in the rest of this year? Is the war with Iran, how soon is that, and what else do you predict?
Okay, so look, everything's leading to this war in Iran. Okay, so look, I mean, they were trying to win this war on the cheap, right? So you go back to the 12-day war last year, and the Israelis really believe that we decapitate the regime. You know, if we kill these generals and these officers and these clerics within Tehran, this will rally the people, and the people will just naturally overthrow the regime, okay? And then what they recognized was the regime is far more resilient, far more cohesive, far more determined than they actually imagined, okay? So the 12-day war was a disaster. But then if you go back to early this year, you know, during New Year's, Netanyahu visited Trump in Mar-a-Lago. What happened right afterwards is that currency speculators working on behalf of Mossad and CIA, they destroyed the rial, the Iranian currency. And this caused massive economic unrest in Iran, which translated into protests. You know, these merchants were protesting in Iran. And this is the classic color revolution playbook, right? Where you cause economic malaise, you have some organic protests, and then you send in provocateurs in order to shoot police officers. Okay, so they killed a lot of security officers. A lot of money was flowing in the country. They brought in some Kurds as insurgents to cause more unrest, and then you control social media, right? You inflame people through social media. But the Iranian response, the Iranians actually had a counter strategy, and what they did was they shut off the internet. When you shut the internet, then these protesters, because a lot of them are Assad, right? They're forced to use Starlink. But then when you use Starlink, they're able now to locate where you are. So they were able to take down a lot of these cells. So they kill a lot of civilians, but they also killed a lot of Mossad operatives in Iran. So this is diminished Israeli capacity in Iran. Okay, people don't really appreciate this, but they've been building these networks for years through cash, they've been investing a lot into these insurgent networks in Iran for a number of years, and now a lot of these networks are destroyed.
Right.
So the last option for the Israelis to win a war against Iran is to stage a false flag operation, and then get the Americans to attack Iran. I don't know what this false flag will look like, okay? But we can expect a false flag operation. What's happening around the world this weekend are these protests calling for the overthrow of the Iranian regime. I'm not sure if you've seen these large protests everywhere around the world, okay? But it's clearly being staged by the Americans and the Israelis.
And Mike Pompeo, former CIA director under Trump's first administration, he tweeted saying that these protests, this came from him, his Twitter account saying that these protests were subverted by Mossad/CIA agents. So this is true. Do you think that Americans have to worry about another 9/11, like a false? Well, not saying that was a false flag attack, but do we expect that? Because they always need a catalyst to go to war. Pearl Harbor was the catalyst to bomb Japan, and 9/11 was the catalyst in order to go into the Middle East, right? In order to get support. And again, there was an attack recently at Hanukkah, or during Hanukkah, the first day of Hanukkah in Australia, and they said it was a Muslim guy. And then a Muslim man ended up stopping the shooter. And they found out that the shooter was taking trips back and forth from the Philippines. He had weird intelligence ties. Do you think that America has to worry about a false flag to that extent?
I think the false flag will probably happen in the Middle East. What will probably happen is a U.S. base gets hit. It'll be very similar to the USS Liberty in 1967, right? And it's a playbook because the Gulf of Tonkin, like the Vietnam War.
Gulf of Tonkin resolution.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that's the most likely situation. And Americans are setting this up because they have all these carrier strike groups in the Arabian Sea right now patrolling, right? So it's very easy to stage a false flag attack.
The Gerald Ford, I see that U.S. military, one, they said to be careful about leaving flights in Iran right now to Americans. They sent out an email. And the other one, I'm seeing military, people in the Navy are hearing that they might have to be deployed to the Gerald Ford. That's the ship that patrols around the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. Another thing I will say is the people running the world today are different from the ones running the world during 9/11, okay? 9/11 was a spectacularly done job, okay? Give credit to these guys, like George H.W. Bush. He was clearly the mastermind behind 9/11, all right? This is a guy who spent decades in intelligence, and he was able to build this network in order to pull off 9/11, okay? It was a really sophisticated act of theater. The guys in charge now aren't like that. They're kind of lazy, they're kind of incompetent, they're indifferent, they're hubris, okay? So So it's not going to be as elaborate as 9/11, and I don't think it'll happen on the American homeland because I think that Americans right now are much more skeptical. They're sort of ready for it, okay? But it'll much more likely happen overseas where American soldiers are targeted, and they'll blame it on the Iranians. It's much easier to do that than something on the
What about Israel bombed Doha? They bombed Qatar very recently, which is an American ally, but there was no outrage at all from American people, especially coming from our greatest ally bombing another one of our allies. If there's going to be a false flag in the Middle East, then how come there was no? Is it all just media manipulation?
I think it's just media manipulation. The other thing that to remember is that these regimes in the GCC, right, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, they're all co-opted by the Israelis. They're all working together. They're all like colonies of the Israelis.
What about Saudi? I was talking to Nick Fuentes the other day, and he said that Saudi has separated from being Israeli ally that they were several years ago. Is this true?
No, it's all theater. So if you look at the history of the Middle East, okay, it was created by the British Empire, right? So the House of Saud was installed as a puppet regime by the British Empire. And so then the question is like, who is the House of Saud? And if you actually go into some of the history, okay, so this is 2003, the Americans go into Baghdad and they capture all the state systems of the Iraqi regime, okay? And when they go over the files of the Iraqi intelligence agency, the Iraqis were absolutely convinced that the House of Saud were crypto Jews, that these people, the House of Saud, these were crypto Jews. They were Sabbatean Frankists, okay?
Yeah.
So this goes back to Sabbatai Zevi. 1666, he declares he's the Messiah, and then he is threatened by the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, saying that either your head or the turban. Okay, you either convert to Islam or I will take your head. And Sabbatai Zevi converts. And then 300 families called the Dome. It's called Churn in the language.
Turks.
But they convert with him, the Turks. Okay, and the Dome are important because the Dome then aligned with the British Empire to overthrow the Ottoman Empire. And the Dome are the ones who are responsible for the Young Turk movement, for Ataturk, okay? But not only that, but the Dome then spread around the region, and they also become the House of Saud. Okay, so that's the origin of these families in the Middle East.
Is this proven about the? I love Saudi Arabia. I travel there all the time, but what's the evidence of that?
Well, I mean, again, I don't actually use documentary evidence in my classes. I use a lot of first principle thinking. Okay, but I'm trying to explain why the House of Saud is in charge, who put them in power, and why they were put into power, and who the British Empire would trust to put into power. Okay, so so the British Empire put the House of Saud into power. Why would they do that? And well, they would do that because they know the House of Saud would be loyal to the British Empire. And why would they be loyal? Because the House of Saud is compromised and they're secretly crypto Jews, and therefore they have no choice but to align with a greater power, whether it's the British Empire or the American Empire afterwards. So again, I don't have evidence, but I'm saying this is what makes the most sense for me, right? Okay. Because what I do is I create frameworks, I create models of the world, and then I test it, I validate it by testing by making predictions about it, okay? Mm-hmm. So my prediction is that Saudi Arabia and Israel, the conflict right now, it's all theater. And if Pax Judaica were to arise, then Saudi Arabia would be a very important part of this Pax Judaica. And the question then is, why do you have this conflict between Saudi Arabia and Israel? And I think the reason why is, if there's a war, then Iran, the Iranian strategy would to create economic warfare. Okay, so it would destroy the economies of the Middle East, which would force the world to get involved in this war, right? That's the only way that the Iranians could possibly win this war, by creating as much economic pain as possible for the rest of the world. And you do that by blowing up the oil fields of Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, right? Because they have drones and ballistic missiles. And so Saudi Arabia is trying to hedge against this. It's trying to play the victim and says, look, listen, we're your best friends. We're the ones trying to stop the Israelis from attacking you. So why you blow up our oil fields?
Mm-hmm. Do you ever worry about travel? Because, I visit Saudi all the time and people make allegations that Saudi is killing journalists. And I've seen you've traveled to Saudi before. Has any of this ever, are you banned from any countries? How does this affected your personal life?
This is something that I don't really worry about. And the reason why is I'm not actually embedded into power networks, okay? So you look at someone like Charlie Kirk, right? He was getting money from these guys. And if you're getting money from these guys, then you're bought by them. So if you speak out, if you don't toe the line, then it's considered betrayal, right? So I don't take money from these guys. I don't even know who these guys are. So I'm this random high school teacher, and I have a YouTube channel, right? I'm this random YouTuber. So they're not interested in me. They don't care about me.
So are you insinuating that Charlie Kirk, as soon as you started saying that October 7th was an inside job and that Epstein was an Israeli spy, are you insinuating that the people that give him money to run Turning Point took him out because he went against their narrative, and that it wasn't actually Tyler Robinson, somebody who was in a relationship with a transgender?
Well, yeah. Yes, I am insinuating that, and I think the evidence is pretty. It's pretty clear. I mean, I think in many ways the Charlie Kirk assassination was supposed to be like 9/11, because remember they had all these like Pentagon military ads prepared for right after Charlie Kirk. I mean, the entire intention was to drum up this national sentiment, to draft young men into fighting for Israel, and then when it was reported, there was this backlash and they turned against it. Okay, but I mean, it's a very similar situation to 9/11.
Okay. And going back to crypto Jews, which is the terminology for undercover Jews, so many have had to convert, right? Actually, I found out recently that my grandfather was essentially half of one. He immigrated to Haiti after World War II, married my black grandmother. And, you know, we didn't know that my whole life. But there's so many of these people, and especially Zabbatai Zevi is one of the biggest examples of that. So he claimed to be the Jewish Messiah in 1666. And he changed that hierarchy within Judaism, because after they were expelled, when the first temple was destroyed, the rabbis took power of the Jewish faith. And so Zabbatai Zevi comes along, claims to be the Jewish Messiah. And most people accept this, correct, that he's the Messiah?
Well, a third.
A third of the Jews accept that?
A third of all Jews in the world at that time, yes.
Okay, 33%. And, yeah, and then he gets rid, is he successful at changing the rabbi hierarchy within Judaism?
Right, okay. So we should understand Zabbatai Zevi as a populist uprising, right? Because at this time in history, Jews are being exploited throughout the Middle East, throughout Europe. And the rabbi is telling the Jewish people, don't worry, have faith, the Messiah will return when God wills it. And the peasants are like, that's easy for you to say because you're a rabbi and you are working alongside the European elite, the European nobility that's suppressing us, okay? So there's a lot of anger at the rabbis. And Zabbatai Zevi, his emergence is, let's reject the authority of the rabbis because they're part of the oppressive class. And let us convert and forgive those who converted, right? Because in the Jewish tradition at that time, the worst crime that you can do is to convert to Christianity or Islam, which is what millions of Jews have done in the past, right? And so the question then is like, how do you understand what they did? And the Jews are like, well, the rabbis are like, well, they'll just burn in hell, right? Don't be like them because all of them will burn in hell. But the problem is that the Jewish faith is one of blood, right? So can you like stomach the idea
explain that again? The Jewish faith is one of blood?
Yeah, meaning like you're born into the faith, right?
Oh,
okay. It's like they're all descended from,
I misunderstood.
from the original Israelite.
Right. Your mother has to be Jewish for you to be Jewish.
That's right. So the idea is like your grandfather is going to burn in hell because he converted to Islam, right? I mean, like are you going?
No, he didn't. My family's all Catholic.
No.
But you would convert if you switched. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, but so the rabbis are saying that if you are a born Jewish and you convert to Christianity or Islam, you will burn in hell for all of eternity.
Right.
I'm saying as a person, as a Jewish person who didn't convert, are you okay with your grandfather who did convert burning in hell? Right? You're probably not. And so what Zabbatai Zevi is, guys, it doesn't matter if you convert or not. What matters is what you truly believe. What matters is your individual faith. That's what matters. Okay? And he showed that by converting himself. And so so remember, Jesus came to redeem us from the original sin. Well, that's what Zabbatai Zevi did as well. He came to redeem the Jews from the original sin of conversion. And so now, if you converted, it doesn't matter anymore. You are still a Jew because your blood determines your identity and your faith is what matters, okay? So you can convert, but as long as you secretly believe in the Jewish faith, you're still a Jew, okay? And that's the idea of crypto Jews. It's okay to insult Jews. It's okay to go against every Jewish tradition. It's okay, but if secretly you still believe you're a Jew, you're a Jew. God will know.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I did ask you this before, but I think this question, maybe I should phrase it a little more directly. So what is the overlap between Frankists, the Rothschilds, and Judaism?
Okay. All right. So there's competing interpretations. Okay. So the Rothschilds are Frankists. Okay. We know that the Rothschild believe in the Frankists. Okay. As well as the Epsteins. Okay. So that's overlap. So you look at Jeffrey Epstein and the Rothschild. Why were they close? Because they're all part of the Frankist movement. Okay. So there are two interpretations of Frankism. The first interpretation, which is the mainstream interpretation, is that Frankism is a heresy. Okay, because what Frankism argues is justification by sin. All right, and the idea is that this world that we live in is a fake world, right? And this fake world is run by evil people, Satan, who impose ideas that make no sense. For example, the idea of sin, right? So for example, you shouldn't eat pork and you can't work on Saturdays, it's Sabbath, right? Wait a minute here. That makes no sense whatsoever. Aren't we, as divine beings who are connected to God, aren't we able to reason for ourselves what is right and what is not right? And how do you prove your faith then? You prove your faith by rejecting the idea of sin and putting your total faith in God. And you do that by breaking taboos, right, including incest. So when you commit an act of incest, what you're doing is you are literally showing that your faith in God is stronger than the conventions of man, right? So Jacob Frank has this great saying where, what I teach you, this is a thing that 10,000 men can't lift, right? This oppresses 10,000 men. But this one thing you can live with a finger, okay? It's light as a feather. It's the idea of taboo and sin, okay? We've been oppressed by the idea of morality, by the idea of sin, by the idea of taboos. And once you free your mind, then you're capable of anything. You're capable of divinity, okay? So that's the main teaching of Jacob Frank. And Jacob Frank is one of the founders of the Illuminati, along with Mayer Rothschild, okay? So Rothschild is a Frankist family. The Frankists are considered a heresy of the Jewish faith. But then there's another interpretation, which is that the Frankism is just a natural extension of the Jewish faith, because the Jewish faith is one based on superiority, racial superiority, right? So like the Jews are just a inherently superior people to everyone else, the Goyim, because they are God's chosen people, and therefore they should be allowed to do whatever they want to demonstrate that they're superior, right? Including breaking taboos. So there are two interpretations. The mainstream interpretation by the rabbis is they're heresy. Let's never talk about them because they're evil. The other interpretation is they're just a natural evolution or the logical conclusion of the Jewish faith.
So what do you think is the real interpretation? My analysis is that the chosen people versus the Goyim ideology is a misunderstanding of what God wanted. So that the Jews, when they were told that you're the chosen people, what it meant was you are the one chosen, and the word of God was revealed to your language to spread the word of God throughout the world, right? And I think the comparison you could see in Islam is like the Quran was revealed in Arabic, and I guess the Arab people were the ones that revealed the message. Muhammad, peace upon him, was an Arab man, or before the time you could argue Semite, but the people of this region and their language, this is who was chosen to get this message, right? And he corrected that and said, do not worship me, do not worship Arabia or this land, worship God and God alone. Do you think that the Jews misinterpreted what was meant by chosen people? Were they meant to be chosen to spread the word of God? But when they first had that crisis of faith, when their temple was destroyed, that's when things went the wrong direction.
Yeah. So, if you look at Jewish history, you look at the history of the Israelites, the king of David, that was a very open, cosmopolitan, diverse society that was actually polytheistic. If you look at the archaeological evidence, the Israelites at that time were polytheistic, and they embraced all different gods, including Baal, Asherah, Yahweh. Okay, but if you're God's chosen people, if you are chosen to be the light of nations, to show how to live as a people, how to be a moral individual, how to be a good person, how do you explain these thousands of years of destruction, persecution, enslavement, right? I mean, like you're really God's chosen people. Why was your temple destroyed, which is the house of God? Why were you enslaved and put into captivity in Babylon? Why were you, why, like, why are you being massacred? Right? So you have these thousands of years of history, and this creates the idea of cognitive dissonance, right? You have this idea, which is like we are God's chosen people, and we are meant to be a good example to everyone else. But then you have thousands of years of history of persecution. And so the only way to justify this is that God is testing us. God it has is God wants us to do great things, right? And so we need to strive to build a better world. We need to build a better world. We need to create Israel and have Israel not to be the light of nations, but to be the ruler of nations. And again, this is my speculation, right? Because I don't know. I'm not Jewish. I'm saying like you have this kind of dissonance where you are God's chosen people, and then you have this thousand years persecution, right? And how do you explain these thousand years persecution? Well, it's to test you. It's to temper you. It's to build you up, to make you strong enough to actually rule the world.
And Zabbatai Zevi, so, okay. Earlier in your lesson about Sabbatai Zevi, I think the lecture was called A Faith of Evil. You mentioned how the Spanish Inquisition, right, that was around 1492?
No, that was the year of the expulsion. So 1492 is when the Jews were expelled from Spain. And this was a traumatic event for Jews, because if there's one place in the world at this time that Jews felt safe and at home, it was Spain, okay? Spain is the origin of the Sephardic Jews, right?
Under Muslim rule, because Muslims allowed for faiths to coexist.
Exactly, right? But then when Spain was reconquered by the Christians were not as tolerant, and the Christians were like, you either convert or you leave, okay? So a lot of people were kicked out, and they were sent to Ottoman Empire, which did welcome them, but then a lot converted, and this is a very, very traumatic event in the Jewish faith, which led ultimately to Zabbatai Zevi, right? Because now you have a problem, like, what do you do with these millions of people, of Jews who converted to another faith? Do we forgive them? Do we punish them? What do we do?
Okay. So the theory now that I'm seeing, you didn't mention this in your lecture, but I was looking it up during it, was that Christopher Columbus, he was expelled, or he was in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition. Do you believe in the theory that he was actually a crypto-Sephardic Jew, and that he was there to find the New World in order to find a project for Pax Judaica?
Look, I'll tell you something really, really funny, but a lot of the people involved in the Spanish Inquisition, the Grand Inquisitors,
also Jews,
were crypto Jews.
Yeah. So they were.
Yeah.
So what's the point of that? Why kick out their own people?
I mean, it's all part of God's plan, right? I mean, the people are being molded, they're being tested. I mean, like, what matters is survival of the people. What matters is survival of the faith. Okay, like for 1,000 years, different empires have tried to destroy the Jewish faith. The Romans were horrific in their crimes, right? That was a Holocaust, really. Like 3 wars that killed millions of Jews. That was a Holocaust. You have the Babylonians. So you have these different empires that try to destroy the Jews. So what matters, okay? God's real plan is for the Jewish faith to persist, even though it may involve sacrifice of millions of Jews as well, right? I mean, like, so what matters is that the elite survive, because the elite are the transmitters of this culture. And if it means that the elite have to convert and then sacrifice their people, well, then that's part of God's plan.
Okay, so do you think that Christopher Columbus was a crypto Jew?
I think it's possible. I haven't looked into. Yeah.
Right, but ultimately it's the small percent of 1% of the elite that are in control, playing both sides, and essentially a lot of them are Frankists. They are trying to use God's will or to act like they are God on earth.
Yep. Because only they know the true plan, right? Only they have the courage to implement God's plan. Because if God's plan involves the death of like 99% of humanity, like, are you okay with doing God's will, right? They are, because they're strong, because they have real faith. We're not. We're just ordinary people. So we're cattle, right? So we shouldn't criticize them.
Right. And there's a lot more I could. Okay, we talked about communism and your predictions. So, okay, the one that I watched last or 2 nights ago about Islamic Empire, the way you talk about Islam is, it sounds, well, from my perspective, obviously I'm biased. You speak with a different sort of righteousness in your voice, and also you did want to go visit Mecca. And my favorite part of this lecture was you were talking about the weaknesses and the advantages of each faith. And you mentioned in Christianity that the benefit was that it was in a religion of empire, that the Romans use it as power and control, right? But the weakness was that the Trinity didn't make any sense to you. Well, to many people, even a lot of Christians, right?
It makes no sense at all.
Why does the Trinity not make any sense to you?
Right. Well, because, we think through intuition, right? So, like, how do we know something is right? Well, we know something is right because it sounds right, because it connects with us, right? But the entire point of the Holy Trinity, okay, an idea that three things can be separate but connected, three things that are different from each other can be at one at the same time. It's meant to confuse you. It's meant to create cognitive dissonance. And so when you accept the idea of the Trinity, the idea is that now you open your portal to all sorts of whatever crap propaganda that they want to instill in you as well. And that's why the Holy Trinity is the very basis of the Catholic religion.
Mm-hmm. And remember, the weakness you said about Islam was that it was too simple and clear, which was like, that really it struck me, because it's like, that doesn't sound like a weakness. That sounds like if I'm in a job interview, they'd be like, what are your weaknesses? And I'm like, well, I'm too direct. I'm too simple, and I work too hard, right? So why would you consider that a weakness?
Well, because we talked to the Frankists. What the Frankists will say is that this is a world of Satan. And so to really rule the world, to really conquer the world, you need to embrace the demonic. You need to be multifaceted. You need to have multiple personalities. You have to, like what you are in the outside has to be different from what you are in the inside. You have to practice depravity. You have to practice manipulation, right? So if you're too simple, you're too direct, that limits your maneuverability in politics.
Okay. So it's a weakness because people will take advantage of, because being Islam it's all about submission to God. So that in terms of empire, it's a weakness in this world.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
What's what do you disagree at all? I mean, basically, why would you not consider yourself a Muslim?
So I have issues with the Islamic faith, okay? My major issue is that, and I got a lot of hate for my lecture, okay? But I believe that organized religion, it changes over time. So maybe in the beginning, it had certain ideas, but in order to accommodate empire, in order to accommodate politics, it shifted over time to become much more conformist, but become much more static. And I don't like that. Okay, I mean, I mean, my sympathies are toward the connection with God directly, right? So rather have an intermediary telling you what God thinks, well, you should be able to feel God in your heart. Okay, and I mean, like, people have said I'm agnostic, or I'm a Luciferian. I don't know what these terms mean. Okay, but I believe that we're all individuals with the divine spark in us. And so we should be all able to connect directly to God. And we should all be able to exercise our imagination, our intuition.
So the disagreement is the divinity within? Because in Islam, it's like, we don't believe God is within. It's that we worship God because he's divine. Okay, so you think there's divine spark within us?
That's right.
Okay. Is that not, isn't that similar? Not exactly, but isn't that a lot what the Frankists believe? That's why they sin. That's why they do things, because, sinning is where you get divine power, that's what they believe.
Right. So the Frankists believe that if we're in this world, we should conquer this world and enjoy the pleasures of this world. Okay. So they believe in longevity. They believe in transhumanism. Okay. And this explains why things are happening the way they are. these billionaires, what are they obsessed with? They're obsessed with living forever, right? Transhumanism, and that's a very Frankist mentality. I, on the other hand, believe that um, our souls are immortal, and this world is just one of many worlds, and we come to this world in order to experience things that we couldn't experience um, in the astral plane. Okay, because in the astral plane, you're pure force, you're pure energy, right? You can't actually feel pain. You can't have sex. You can't eat any food. So we're here to have these rare, unique experiences that make us more enlightened. And we're here also to bring comfort, to bring enlightenment, to bring joy to others as well, because that's what makes us really happy, our connections with others. So there are things that we cannot experience elsewhere that we can experience here. And so we should make the most of our opportunities while we're here. But at the same time, as these immortal divine souls, we're constantly in the process of seeking enlightenment. And the problem is that if you make a mistake, okay, if you choose a path that is wrong, okay, for example, you choose to be Jeffrey Epstein, right? Well, there has to be a fail-safe mechanism in order to steer you into the right direction. And this fail-safe mechanism is death. Death is release. Death is catharsis, right? Death is an escape from this hell that we live in. But don't worry. But don't worry, because your soul won't die, and eventually you'll come back to this world to live a better life based on the mistakes you made in this life, right? So the Frankists want to live forever because they cannot countenance the possibility that they'll go back in the astral plane and discover all the evil that they've done. Okay, so they want to avoid this possibility, right? Whereas I think a true human is to appreciate that the universe is a journey. Life is a journey towards enlightenment, which is to be closer to God. And this is what all religious traditions teach, by the way.
Okay, so where do you think that we go when we die?
I think that we're composed of different elements. Okay, so I think consciousness is multidimensional, or sorry, infinite in its dimensions. And so there's a part of us that's a soul, but then there's parts of us as well that dissipates into the ether. Okay, so it's very complicated. I can't really describe it using language, but it's like we are here and we are forever. Okay, we're now, but we're also eternal. And so, when we die, there's part of us that goes back to the astral plane, but then there's also a part of us that seeps into others as well, like memories, right? We live on as memories in others. And so I think the point of our existence is to create, is to make ourselves memorable in the minds of others, right? And so that's what drives me. Okay, so one way to do that, of course, is to have children, and to raise your children and to be happy and healthy. Another way of doing that is to be kind and generous to others, so that you impact their lives in a positive manner. And another way of doing that is through teaching, which is what I do online. And that's why I'm talking to you, because you have an audience, you have a huge audience that I don't actually interact with. I deal with an older audience. And like for you, I'm able to spread my message to others and leave an imprint on others that may impact their lives for the better. And I think that's really the purpose of life.
But that's the difference between a Frankist and someone like you, because it seems like you want to put out good, and we appreciate your work greatly. But so many people, there was, I'm sure you know Andrew Tate, he made the argument that Epstein was a successful man because Epstein is memorable, and people have immortalized him within memes if he's actually dead. And he made his mark, and people know who he is. The difference between your belief and somebody like Tate, when he's saying Epstein is a success, is that you want to be remembered through good things, right? If you want to just be remembered on its own, then you can start a pedophile island and blackmail people for Israel. But that's not going to.
That takes skill. Let's give him some credit, okay? That takes some talent to pull off. Like to deal with Bill Clinton and Bill Gates at the same time.
He was good at what he did, undeniably. But would you consider Epstein a successful man because he's immortalized and he's going to be remembered?
That's a really good question. Andrew Tate is right. I think he is successful in that he will become forever. He'll be a historical figure because because like 100 years from now we'll still be talking about Jeffrey Epstein. So yeah, and that's a very Frankish mentality. Like it's not about living a good life; it's living a memorable life, right? But I'm trying to provide an alternative where, you know what, wouldn't it be better to be remembered for like good things because because that will inspire people to good, right? I mean, Jeffrey Epstein is going to inspire people to evil, whereas I'm going to inspire people to good. But like that's a very important idea in religion where where it's a law of symmetry or polarity, where if someone like Jeffrey Epstein, who's pure evil exists, then someone who's pure good will exist as well. So good must exist alongside
Right.
evil. So I mean, like the fundamental law of the universe is free will, free choice. If Jeffrey Epstein chooses to be evil, and we can't blame him for that, okay? Because it's his choice. But we can also choose to be good, and that's a challenge before us. When there are these evil role models, you have to choose to be the light of this world, and that's what makes this life so interesting, and that's what makes your choice memorable because you're able to do the thing that goes against convention, whether it's doing tremendous evil or it's doing tremendous good. It goes against convention both ways, right?
So why do you choose, if you said that being remembered as a metric of success, why do you choose to do good and not evil?
Because I can't sleep at night if I do evil. It's that simple. I mean, like, I went to Yale, and at Yale they teach you to be Frankist, right? I'm like, I'm sorry, but these Ivy League are all like MK Ultra indoctrination machines. But I couldn't sleep at night if I knew in my heart that I brought some evil in this world. So I think that our consciousness is all infinite. We're always communicating with the past, the future, with the here and the now, but also the infinite and the eternal. And it's really what you choose to focus on. And in my mind, it's focused on certain things. I'm opening myself up to consciousness, and I want to be able to sleep well at night. Okay, and then you look at Jeffrey Epstein and how he's able to do what he did. And the reason why is he can't sleep at night. So he has to engage in drugs. He has to engage in all this evil in order to move on with his life. Because once you embrace the demonic, then you are trapped, okay, by the demonic. Then you have to fully embrace the demonic, and you have to like worship it in order to basically live on.
All right, so Epstein is serving demonic entities and doing good is serving God, correct?
That's a metaphorical way of putting it, yes. But I think what's really important is that God is not judgmental. Okay, God has given us free will, and we can do whatever we want. And God will never punish us for evil. God won't reward us for good. It's because we ourselves seek enlightenment. It's because we ourselves seek to feel better about ourselves that we commit to good.
So what do you think is keeping you up at night if you do something wrong? I'm sure everybody can relate to this watching this, right? If you're rude to a friend, or say you get emotional in a class and you lash out at Amber because she's reading slow or something, what is the reason why you kept up? Like, so what is that thought keeping you awake?
Empathy, right? Empathy, because like when you shout at someone and then you go away, you're able to remember what you did, but you're able to switch perspective and see how that person feels being shouted at, because you yourself were shouted at, right? And the question is like, where does empathy come from? And I think empathy just comes from wisdom. It comes from living many lives and having different perspectives. So for me, I just read a lot. As a young person, I was an alienated individual. I was an immigrant in Toronto. I was bullied a lot. And so I just read a lot. When you read a lot, you develop empathy.
Mm-hmm. Depends on what you read. You could read sex magic books like Epstein, or read, he had a book, next to the Talmud that said, I'm sure you've seen this, right? He had books about Kabbalah, sex magic, and stuff. If you read the wrong literature, I'm sure you could also be.
I mean, like the public libraries don't have these books, right? So I stuck with, like literature and science fiction and fantasy.
Okay. Yeah, and I really liked your lecture about Rich Dad Poor Dad, and you said you've read a lot of books about parenting and trying to find the right styles and the right ways to raise your children. What sort of mistakes do you think people are making in raising their children?
Um, I think the biggest mistake is to believe that your child is a blank slate. Because that's what I believed when I first had kids. And so what I believe that is that, if I build good habits, if I present myself as a good role model, if I steer my kids to the right activities, then my kid will be better and better. And what I didn't recognize is that every child is an independent person capable of all agency from the first day. And every child wants to be respected. Every child wants to be independent. Every child wants to pick his or her path. And that's the only way to enlightenment, okay? If the child is allowed to be himself or herself and make his own mistakes. I have 3 kids and they're all different personalities. And I wanted, I have a certain idea in my head of what I wanted my kids to be. And the harder I try, the more frustrated I get because my kids refuse to obey me. And so over these past few years, the greatest lesson that I've taught my kids is to respect the freedom of each individual, to be non-judgmental, to appreciate my child for himself or herself. And I really think that's the greatest mistake that parents make.
Kind of like the Islamic rule, like allow tolerance of other faiths and religion, let people.
I will tell you this, okay? I will tell you this. I've been to Saudi Arabia, I've been to Afghanistan, I've been to quite a few Islamic countries, and it surprised me how happy the kids are. Okay, I mean, like if you go to Islamic countries, the kids are a lot happier, a lot healthier, a lot more emotionally regulated than Western kids.
Mm-hmm. And you said that I saw your video about growing up in Toronto and getting bullied, and obviously I can relate. I mean, I probably don't look as Asian now, but I grew up super, I got some of the same things, and so did my mother. And so when you were alienated and reading these books, what was the most transformative literature that you found?
When I was young, I read a lot. In the first stage, I was a huge fan of Isaac Asimov because I was really into science fiction. And I just loved the way that he looked at the world from a macro perspective. So he was not a great writer, but he had a very vivid imagination. And I really appreciated that. And so reading Isaac Asimov just really helped to expand my imagination. For the longest time, I was a huge fan of Ayn Rand, The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, because I also believed in individualism. I also believed I was a persecuted genius who would one day show the world that I was right. So as a teenager, I was really into Ayn Rand. And then I got into John Steinbeck a lot because I was really into his stories. I've been through different phases. I was also a really avid comic book fan. Okay, so I love the X-Men. When I was young, I read the X-Men all the time. They're my favorite characters because the world of the X-Men seemed much more real than like the world of Spider-Man or the Avengers, right? Because the Spider-Man, Avengers, it's pretty simple good versus evil world. Whereas X-Men, there's actually a lot of more ambiguity. Like, is Magneto a really good person or a bad person, right? Because Magneto is trying to save his people. And Magneto is being realistic about the intentions of human beings. Like, if we just trust human beings, they're going to come kill all of us, right? Mm-hmm. So I was really into X-Men comics for a long, long time. Yeah.
What sort of information and books would you recommend people like us read?
So what I recommend is to read novels, long form novels, because if you read long form novels, they build a universe, and you go into this universe, and you're really able to expand your imagination. You're really able to expand your empathy. So the problem with young people nowadays is, people aren't encouraged to read. You go to university, and like people don't even read books anymore. People are encouraged to read essays or excerpts, but not actual books. So it's really, really important to read books. And so certain authors that I would recommend just to get started because they're so much fun. Okay, I love James Ellroy. I'm not sure if you've read James Ellroy, but LA Confidential. He's so much fun. So James Ellroy, Ellroy. Okay, I recommend him. I recommend John le Carre, who is a spy author. I recommend Anna Maxted, Maxted, because she writes romance novels. I recommend science fiction. Some good science fiction is John Wyndham, Wyndham. He's a lot of fun. But like the greatest act of rebellion that you can do in today's world, okay, is to reclaim your attention. It really is. Because the way that they keep control over you is by monopolizing your attention, right? By constantly feeding you distractions after distractions. So the greatest act of rebellion you can do is to sit by yourself, solitary, read a book for hours and hours, and just ignore the world and reclaim your attention, reclaim your mind. And so I mean, just get into reading. I mean, and I started reading books because I started reading comic books, but then I started to upgrade myself over time. So I mean, I teach the Iliad, I teach the Divine Comedy. These are the great books I think everyone should read. But read them when you're ready, right? So yeah.
Divine Comedy. I remember you wrote that. That was Don Ibn Rashid. Oh, that was by somebody in the Islamic Empire, right? Or he influenced Dante's Divine Comedy, Ibn Rashid.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yes.
I remember.
Yeah.
And yeah, what about I'm a big fan of Ernest Hemingway. He has a lot of novels.
Yeah.
You're a fan?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a huge fan, but Ernest Hemingway, he's hard to read. You actually have to sit down and close read his works.
Yeah.
His best work, of course, is The Sun Also Rises.
Yep, that's the best one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, you have to be a very good reader to read Ernest Hemingway. Whereas if you just want to start out, then I would just say get in the habit of sitting down for hours and hours and just focus on a book.
Yeah, Hemingway's difficult because he doesn't spell it out for you, which I appreciate. I like when authors, he wrote a short story about a woman who had to get an abortion, but at no point in the short story did it mention it. And The Sun Also Rises, I'll just give it away. In World War I, the main character, the protagonist, he has an injury where he can't have sex because a grenade got rid of his balls. And so that impotence affects all of his relationships and all of his conversations. So that type of that's what but yeah, it takes a lot of energy to pay attention to. So you think a lot of people find that Andrew Tate was saying that reading is gay and that you shouldn't pay attention to it, that it's a waste of time. You disagree?
Okay. Yeah. I think reading is fundamental to being human.
Right.
And again, I mean, I don't exaggerate, but if there's one thing that you can do to rebel against the system, to reclaim your own individuality, it's by reading.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Especially,
because what reading is.
Good. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's a mirror into yourself and into the world. Okay. I mean, it's also a light where you read. You're in connection with the author. You're in connection with the work, and you are enhancing your own individuality. You're shining your individuality onto the world because when you read, it's your own interpretation, right? Mm-hmm. Reading a book, a really good book, is a portal into the divine.
Right. So, have you read any of the Quran?
I've read bad translations, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I've read bad translation. But they say the problem is you have to read the Quran in Arabic. You have to learn Arabic first.
Yeah. You don't have to, but the translated versions, to understand it completely, you have to understand original Arabic, which is difficult. And you've read the Bible as well. A lot of your lectures quote the Bible, especially the Old Testament.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. And I remember you said that you found it schizophrenic, and what was your interpretation of the Bible?
Yeah, the problem with the Bible is that it's the most valuable real estate in the world, right? It's the most valuable mental real estate in the world. And so people are always competing and fighting over this real estate. And so there are lots of redactions. There's lots of changes to the Bible over the years. And it's almost impossible to figure out the true intention of the original writer, okay? But there are certain parts of the Bible that's pure literature. And when it's pure literature, what I mean is that it has the divine flowing from it, okay? So if you go and read the book of Genesis, that's divine. the book of Genesis. It's pure literature. And then it's the New Testament, like the Gospel of Mark is also pretty divine as well, but especially Genesis.
So why do you think we're here?
We're here because we want to be here. We're here because we want to experience the universe for its infinite, eternal possibilities. And so we're here to practice, exercise our free will. Because it's only through free will can you actually expand the creativity of the universe, okay? So, I teach this when I teach Divine Comedy. But the difference between God and the human, even though we have God in us, is that humans can make mistakes. Humans can die. Humans can feel pain. God cannot. And therefore, we humans have an imagination. Because imagination comes from pain, from suffering, from making mistakes. And so through our creativity, we're expanding God. Okay, so God is eternal, but it's also infinite. So it's always expanding. And through our creativity, through the practice of our imagination, we're expanding the possibilities of God, and we're bringing joy and light and love to the universe. So we're here to imagine things. We're here to love each other. So what I teach is this. The grand secret of the universe is love is the unifying force of the universe, right? When you love someone, you're connected to God, you're connected to everyone else. The imagination is the animating force of the universe. So when you imagine, okay, when you imagine new possibilities, when you tell stories, when you teach, you are making the universe much more alive. You're expanding the possibilities of the universe. So we're here for two reasons: to love, to find someone to love, and to love that person deeply and unconditionally, like Dante loved Beatrice, right? And to imagine things, to teach, to create, to learn.
Did you find most of this analysis through your own experience, or who told you this?
The divine, okay? Because when you actually read the Divine Comedy, you have absolutely no idea. You have absolutely no idea what's going on, okay? I mean, I spent like 6 months on that stupid thing, and I had no idea what was going on. And I went on YouTube and I looked at every single lecture I could find on Dante, and there's quite a few, okay? So it made no sense to me what they were saying, okay? And then I just had a dream. I just woke up and it said, "Oh, love," okay? And not only that, but it said, "Go to this section." And I went to the section and I read it and I thought, "Oh my God, I'm starting to get it," okay? It's starting to reveal itself to me, okay? So it's the universe communicating with me so that I can understand the Divine Comedy, so that I can communicate with others as well. And like that's a great secret that these elites understand. Like in school, we're taught that, it's all just material and it's all just process. So if you want to write an essay, just follow this work process and you'll write a great essay. And you know what? No author, no writer in the world has ever followed this stupid process of doing research, forming a thesis, create evidence, do the structure, do the outline, edit it, blah blah, and now you have an essay. Okay, that's what they teach you in school because that's what's convenient to teach you. But if you look at every single genius, if you look at every person who's creative, it's all through imagination. It's all through inspiration. It's like this: you woke up one day and you have this compulsion to write something or draw something. Okay, and you can't help yourself. And you're completely focused on the moment because you are being possessed by a certain entity that a muse or an angel or God. Okay, so that's something that the elite understand, right? Why do they practice child sacrifice? Why do they practice cannibalism?
Yeah.
Because they're trying to be possessed by a greater force that allows them the imagination to control the world.
Yeah, Leslie Wexner, back in the 80s, they're finding an article where he said that he was possessed by a Jewish demon. Again, Leslie Wexner is the one who financed Jeffrey Epstein. So it's like that a demon, he's saying he was possessed by a demon. It's like, and that demon's purpose was to latch on to others. And you had a great lecture about why they do the most evil things. And you said the most evil out there, it was a lecture about Palestine. The most evil thing you could do is to sacrifice a child, which we're now seeing in the Epstein files. And it's in order to attach to a realm. And so it's like you're almost spiritually connected to all the people that have done this in history. You're now within this realm.
That's right. You're actually in a certain part of the universe that gives you inspiration and intuition. That's right.
Yeah, I see. I can see the reflection that your kids are running around. So I don't want to hold you longer than. Oh, you froze. Was it the Zoom call, Professor Jiang? Wow, that was weird timing. Maybe he went to another realm. Is he fake freezing on me? No, he's not. There's no way. Oh, cool.
Can you repeat that?
You're. Oh, okay. No, it's.
Sorry, my.
Oh, okay. I was just asking if you were in a rush because I could see in the reflection that your children were running around. I don't want to.
No, my internet got cut off, so I had to switch locations.
Oh, okay, perfect. Yeah. So again, switching away, we went pretty philosophical and over there. People were really trying to see. I haven't seen yet your lecture about crypto, and now that the Epstein files have been released, they're saying that Bitcoin is part of a greater conspiracy and is also controlled by the Rothschild. Oh no, don't nod. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, that is correct. Yes. It is a national security strategy so let's look at Bitcoin, okay? And the idea of Bitcoin is that it is an open ledger where you can secretly conduct all interactions, right? And so why Bitcoin is valuable is, first of all, it's a store of value. It's a store of wealth because it's rare. And second is that it is anonymous, right? So like you're a drug dealer and you can use Bitcoin, right? So who does this benefit? It benefits the CIA because CIA is the most notorious drug trafficker and human trafficker in the world. And so it allows them to conduct all these operations secretly. It also allows them to spy on rogue regimes like North Korea and the Iranians in order to access more information. And it makes perfect sense for the CIA to create this sort of thing. The other thing you need to ask is like, what's the capacity to create this thing, right? Because it can't be this random guy working in his basement for a number of years. Because why won't he take credit? Why won't he monetize this, right? So the agency in the United States that is very good at creating things like the internet, GPS, is DARPA, which is the think tank of the Pentagon, right? So it could be NSA, it could be CIA, it could be DARPA, like who knows? But it's deep state. If you just go into the history of Bitcoin, it's very suspicious.
So who do you think is the founder of Bitcoin? It's still anonymous, correct?
Yeah, I wouldn't know the individual, but it's probably NSA, CIA, DARPA. Yeah.
So, Professor Jiang, what am I supposed to invest my money in? Where could I? where do I put the wealth that I've acquired? So, if fiat currency is controlled by the Federal Reserve, if it's controlled by the Rothschild central banking system, it's not actually real. Bitcoin, you're saying, is controlled by the CIA. If I buy real estate, it's going to be in America, which is a failing empire. If I buy, is it just gold? Is that the best?
Yeah, but then the question is like, where do you store this gold, right? And what are you going to use gold for? Yeah, you can have a lot of gold, but when the world goes to shit, right? I mean, like what's gold going to get you, right? So okay. Here's my theory. So there's something called the Allegory of the Cave by Plato. In the Allegory of the Cave, everyone is chained to the floor, right? And the neck is shackled, so you can't move around. You're just staring at a wall. Behind everyone is a fire. And then there are people, the power elite, that have puppets. And they project these puppets onto the wall. And so you're seeing a shadow world, okay? Like it's a movie projector. And people, because they don't know any other reality, they see that they think that the shadow reality is the real reality, and they give it names, they imagine it to be true. And because they imagine it to be true, then it becomes true. And that's a perfect metaphor to describe the financial system that we live in today, right? Money, wealth, it's an illusion. It's just literally paper. But we imagine it to be true, and it focuses our attention, and we want more of it. And what we don't recognize is that what true wealth is our imagination. What true wealth is our connection with each other. Because when we get together, we can imagine anything that we want. We can create any site that we want. Okay, so you think that your wealth is in these millions of dollars that you've made, like doing live streaming. No, it's not. The true wealth that you have is your imagination, your knowledge that you've accumulated over years of study. Your true wealth is in your influence. Your true wealth is in the community that you built online, and that will carry you anywhere you go in the world. Okay, if there's a new world, guess what? If there's no internet, guess what? You do lectures, you go teach, you go write stories, right? That's your true wealth.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Something.
And
Yeah. I was banned everywhere over 3 years ago. I was wiped off of all social media. I can guess you could probably understand why. And
yeah,
when that happened, my parents were telling me to get a job, or like, they were starting to be extremely uncomfortable and panic. But I knew that I would be able to find a way to work it out, because I believed in the information that I'd gathered and my abilities in speaking and all that. I knew I would be able to carry with. And even then, if I get banned all over again, I've been reinstated on YouTube, still banned everywhere else. But if something happens, I know I'll be able to still find a way.
exactly. And so you've got it made. Okay, you'll be good. And that's your true wealth, your reputation, your influence, your imagination. Okay, and so whatever happens in a society, as long as you are willing to make the adjustments, as long as you're willing to keep on learning and being creative and being a good person, you'll succeed wherever you go. And that's my philosophy.
That is reassuring. So real currency is through learning, and real knowledge is power. Or
Exactly.
power is all from knowledge. Okay.
Right. Yeah, the imagination, the capacity to create new things by yourself, the capacity to draw people's attention, to focus people's attention. That's what they really understand. Like these billions of dollars that they have, it's all play money. They understand that. It exists because people think it's real. But the moment people don't think it's real,
It's
it
not.
disappears on them. So
Right.
like who cares,
Okay. But what about, so you have children and you're married, if I'm not mistaken. What about, you have to provide for them? How do you quantify that?
Right. So if the world changes, okay, the imagination will carry you through, because let's just say for whatever reason, there's a solar flare, okay, and all electricity goes out. Now what you do? Well, what you do is you go talk to your neighbor and says, hey, maybe we should work together. And your neighbor's like, yes, we should work together because the world has gone to shit, right? And then all the people get together, and somehow people intuitively figure out what they should be doing, right? And we know this because, I'm not sure if you've been in a blackout, right, where the traffic lights go off, right? Well, what happens? What happens is cars don't crash into each other. What happens is cars slow down, and then you have people who are just random strangers. They go to, the center, and they start to direct traffic. Okay, so the laws, we think that without laws, without authority, we can't exist. We can't function. But the truth of the matter is that no, if there are no laws, if there are no authority, if there are no experts telling us what to do, if there are no teachers, what we do is rely on our own intuition. What happens is we rely on our connections with each other, and that's what carries us through, right? So so I have absolutely complete confidence in myself. If one day, all governments were to disappear, if all technology were to disappear, somehow we humans will be resilient, we'll be imaginative, and we'll figure out a way out of this.
Right. And I've seen recently that in this generation specifically, you can see how they've tried to separate us from that knowledge. Previous generations, things like cooking, things like being able to do your laundry, being able to operate motorized vehicles, and that was the norm. But increasingly, people don't know how to cook. They don't know how to make their own food. And simple knowledge in order to survive has become scarce, which keeps the slave class more reliant upon the elites.
It's all intentional. It's all intentional. It's power is the capacity to focus your attention. That's what power is, right? right? If you're focused online all the time, you lose capacity to function for yourself. And that's what the AI surveillance state is. The AI surveillance state is to make you completely dependent on technology, to make you completely dependent on the AI system. Imagine a world in which you have you have a cell phone, but the cell phone is talking to you all the time, telling you how to think, what to do, reassuring you, right? That's what ChatGPT is. That's why they're spending billions of dollars on AI because it's meant to be the new control mechanism once fiat currency goes to zero.
Okay, and yeah, this is ushering in so the new world. Do you believe the Antichrist is going to be AI generated?
Yes, it is AI. It's literally AI. That's what the Orthodox tradition teaches, right? The Russians believe this, where it is actually Western civilization that's the Antichrist. And what's the end point of Western civilization? The AI surveillance state, Pax Judaica.
So it will be developed like what's the best analogy that we could visualize? Joaquin
Yeah,
Phoenix's AI girlfriend.
that's right. And think of Brave New World, right? Brave New World. I'm not sure if you read the
I've
book,
read it.
but it's a world. It's a world where you're not oppressed. You're made happy through drugs, through conformity, right? If you're not happy, then they're very concerned about how to make you happy. And it's run by experts called the controllers, and the entire point of society is to make you constantly happy, happy, happy. Okay, so when you combine these two things, it gives you a visual representation of what the future would look like. Her and Brave New World.
Like in The Matrix, I'm sure you've seen that movie where the
Yeah,
character
yeah.
he chooses to eat the steak and he says ignorance is bliss. So are
Yep.
things like SSRIs and we're more medicated than we've ever been. We're told that our panic will be resolved through a COVID vaccine. Like you'll feel good again. You're panicked through here, what you're seeing in the media. This vaccine will fix it all. Right? Brave New World is very similar to 1984.
Yep.
Are all these also parts of the control mechanisms to make us reliant
Yes.
upon external factors to keep us happy?
Yes. I mean, look at how social media has proliferated. Like, they knew that this thing would be addictive. They designed it to be addictive. And how we know is the Silicon Valley executives who are responsible for social media, they don't let their kids online. Their kids go to like these um, uh, Montessori schools where they play outdoors all the time. You know, these Waldorf schools where they're out in the woods all the time because like they know what these things do, right? And so why did the government allow this to happen? Why allow an entire generation to be addicted to social media, even though the evidence is overwhelming that social media causes depression among girls. It increases anxiety and fear. Well, because then you have solution, which is these SSRI drugs, right? So you have a generation which is addicted to both social media as well as SSRI drugs.
What is the truth about COVID?
I think it was an accident. Okay, I think COVID was an American bioweapon that was sent to China for gain of function research, and it was released accidentally, and then the entire world used this as an opportunity to test a mass control mechanisms. Right? What would lockdown look like? What would mass surveillance look like? Would people be willing to take vaccines? And to the surprise, people are much more compliant than they imagine, right? It's like, oh my God, we just like give people a random vaccine, they'll take it because they believe us. So it's an experiment, but I guarantee you that now that they've done the experiment, they have this master plan for how to handle an emergency. Like, so let's just say the economy collapses. Well, guess what, guys? There's a new virus, and we have to lock you up, and we have to give you a new vaccine. Okay, so I think the first time was perhaps an accident, but the second time will be manufactured.
As people in the chat are saying you're defending China, but you've seen through the Epstein emails that Bill Gates allegedly was trying to figure out a pandemic simulator in 2017, in correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein. So this was an accident. They accidentally saw how much control they have over the Goyim slave class.
That's right. And power is addictive, right? So next time they're going to do this again, and it'll be much more controlled.
Okay. have you not lost, so knowing this, that we're going to be controlled by AI, we're going to be reliant upon them for basic happiness, how, and you've also stated that the American empire will probably crumble very soon. How, well, you're not American, but how do you maintain sanity?
My children, right? Because we're here to make our children happy, to teach others. Okay, so the world is going to shit, but I'm doing what I love, which is being with my children, teaching, writing essays, and that's why we're here. So
Doing
as
the
long
right
as
thing,
you
yeah.
find a purpose.
Through
Yeah,
purpose.
as long as you just achieve and fulfill your purpose, your telos, as Aristotle says, you'll be happy.
And you prefer Aristotle to Plato? I remember you made the analogy that Plato's philosophy embodies Christianity. Aristotle and Islam have an overlap. I've never heard that explanation before. How does that work?
Okay, so to be honest with you, my understanding of Plato and Aristotle has changed over time.
Okay.
So I'm much more sympathetic towards Plato than before. Before I thought Plato was a fascist, who was very much interested in control, and now I appreciate that Plato is much more imaginative, much more poetic than I previously thought. Aristotle is a man of science. He basically is trying to create a system of knowledge inquiry and analysis. Yeah.
And not to get too conspiratorial, but I'm seeing people are asking a lot about Antarctica, which people are trying to figure out. When YouTubers and content creators go to Antarctica, they tell them to turn off the cameras. You can't have Starlink. You can't have internet access. What is yeah, I'm not trying to hold you forever. I'm sure you're busy, but
Right.
what do you think
Right.
that's about?
Okay. I think the greatest secret out there is that the history that we've been taught about evolution, about development of humanity, it's all fake. Okay, so we have about 10,000 years of human history. That's it. But we know that we Homo sapiens have been around for about 200,000 years. 200,000 years. Okay, that's the best estimate. So what were we doing for the rest of this time? Okay, that's a question that science has never really answered for us. Okay, that's point number one. Point number two is that we have some archaeological sites that are close to us. Okay, so Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Okay, Göbekli Tepe, Turkey, Tepe in Turkey. We've only uncovered 5% of all of it, and we have. And so why we haven't uncovered the rest of it? It's not about money issue. It's because the truth will destroy the traditional narrative. Then you have the Amazon in Brazil, and how we're discovering how these ancient civilizations existed in the Amazon before, and also these ancient civilizations were the ones who actually created the Amazon, because the Amazon itself is not an organic creation; it was a man-made creation. So if you do, if you just work from first principles, what you recognize is that we've probably had civilizations before this, okay, that were destroyed in the Great Flood, okay, or what was technically called the geomagnetic excursion, the magnetic pole excursion. Would you say that the magnetic poles, the north and south, they switch every 6,000 years, okay? And when you do that, you change the geography, the topology of the Earth. You cause massive floods, you cause climate change, and these civilizations were destroyed. So we are not part of the first civilization, okay? Another thing is the pyramids, the Egyptian pyramids. We are not able to create the Egyptian pyramids using the technology that we have today, okay? It's incredible to think about how, we have the most advanced spaceships and computers, but we're not actually able to recreate the pyramids because we don't have the technology, all right? So I think it's safe to say that there have been other civilizations before us that were also advanced, but in a different way, okay? Maybe rather than focus on the material, they were focused more on the spiritual. That's my little boy. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah. Hi. Want to say hi?
Ni hao.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah. So I think that's a greatest secret that the elite refused to allow us to understand. Even Epstein was spending a lot of time looking for Atlantis, right? And and like so, the elite understand that there have been past civilizations before, and they spend a lot of time and resources looking for these past civilizations. So what was Stephen Hawking doing on Epstein Island, right? Well, he was part of this search for these lost civilizations. So the elite understand this, but it's the greatest secret that they want to keep from us because it would destroy everything. Okay, once we understand that there have been past civilizations, everything goes out the door, including evolution, including this material conception of the universe. Okay.
Okay. So yeah, you mentioned earlier about the early Homo sapiens. I was wondering what you were going to say about evolution, but you answered that question, and it's probably the explanation for the pyramids. But that's a long conversation for that we could. There's so much more that I could ask you. I don't want to hold you too long from your family and everything. So is there another time that we could do another Zoom call next week or something?
Yeah. No. I love talking to you. And let's set up again for next month. The weekend of March 9th works for me.
Perfect.
So, yeah. And
Okay.
I'll be back in Beijing at that time. So, and my kids are still here, on the island. So I'll be much more free to talk there.
I look forward to it. And again, I'll probably watch I'll watch the Divine Comedy lecture tonight. And before the next conversation, I'll have watched a lot more. We're taking I have 40 pages of, I don't know if I can screen share, but I showed you some of them. It's been great seeing your lectures. Best of luck to you and your family. I really enjoy what you're putting out there. And, I do want to just thank you because I think you're doing God's work.
Well, thanks so much. I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and that's why I'm doing it. And let's talk again soon.
Have a great rest of your day. Great to meet you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Woo! Banger, right? W's up in the chat. Professor Jiang. Incredible collab. There's so much more. I could have kept talking to him for another 4 or 5 hours. The chat is flying right now. I can't even, it's literally not loading. W collab. I even want to do like a takeaway and stuff. Was anyone taking notes? Because he said I wanted to focus on the stream and I couldn't. Look at the W's in the chat. Bro, I've never seen it like this. Look at that. That's incredible, bro. Fire. So we're going to speak again in a month. I look forward to